Appice. On the telephone line, I welcome in, ranked by RollingStone.com as one of 28 greatest drummers of all time. We welcome in Carmine Appice. Carmine, thanks so much for your time today.
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Good, good. Hey, it's an honor to chat with you. You're one of the best in drumming. I want to begin. Carmine, you're ranked number 28 of the greatest drummers of all time. I read early in your life you were influenced by the jazz guys. How did drumming begin for you?
Well, basically, my cousin Joey was a drummer. He had a drum set in his house. And every time, the Italian family, we'd go over to see each other. I'd see his drums. I'd get up and start banging on them. Then I'd go home and bang on the pots and pans. And my parents would buy me toy drum sets and all that. And so little by little, I became more into it. And then finally, when I was, maybe 10, 11, we bought a real drum set which consisted of a snare drum, a bass drum, and a cymbal at the original Sam Ash music store in Brooklyn, where I grew up. and I played that religiously every day after school. And we put it in, when I was in Brooklyn, we had a cellar, not a basement, more like a cellar, And I put it down there, and I would practice down there. And I started doing gigs when I was like maybe 12. And then I started taking lessons, and by the time I was like 15, I was really good, So all through my teens, I played. And then there's more drummers that came up in my family, a total of 7 drummers on my father's side.
Wow. So now you were a student of music theory, right? You graduated high school around 64?
Yeah.
Was that during the time of your first group, the Vidals?
It was, and I originally went to a school called Grady, which had I was going to be an electrician, because my mother and father always said, well, if you're going to play music and you're going to play drums, you have to have something to fall back on. So I was going to fall back on, this electrical installation thing. So I went to Grady for a year, and I didn't like it. So now I moved to another high school, New Utrecht High School, which is the one that you saw at the beginning of Welcome Back, Kotter. That was New Utrecht. And I majored in music. So my classes were like orchestra, because I could read music from taking the lessons. I was the only one in the whole school that could read drum music. So I went, orchestra first period, band second period, third period was like music theory, the fourth period was gym, then lunch. Then I have maybe math, social studies, and French, and that was my day. And then afterwards, I would be in the marching band or the ensemble or the jazz band. So I was always doing a lot of stuff. As a matter of fact, when I graduated, I won in the yearbook as the most musically inclined.
Now, Carmine, hearing about the Vidals, you showed innovation early in your craft because you used different versions of the band, right? When they played different venues.
Well, yeah. Well, we always did that back then. Some people wanted a trio. Some people wanted a sax player. Some people wanted different things. It depended on the kind of music it was, because we used to play music for all occasions, the card said. And basically that meant, weddings, bar mitzvahs, sweet 16 parties, rock dances, jazz gigs. We played all kinds of stuff. So depending on what the gig was, we added a sax, or maybe added a sax and a trombone, or a sax and a trumpet. If you got more of an R&B thing, it would be more of an R&B thing with horns,
We're talking to the legendary drummer Carmine Appice. Carmine, 67, the band Vanilla Fudge came into existence. How did the band begin? How did the band members meet? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I was the last one in, so the other guys met Mark and Tim Bogert, Mark Stein and Tim Bogert. They were in a band called Rick Martin and the Showmen together, and they wanted to leave when the Rascals started making it and do something more like the Rascals. So they did an advertisement. They got Vince Martell, the guitar player, and they had another drummer. And then they did an album called The Pigeons. That's what they were called. And it was sort of like the Rascals. And then around Long Island, this whole scene with the Vagrants started, which has Leslie West in it. And it started like what we call production numbers, slowing things down and making them more a produced song rather than just a 3-minute song. with different intros and outros and stuff. So at that point, the drummer couldn't do that they had. So they found me in a club in New Jersey, and they came in and said, "Look, we'd like you to join our band." And I was like, "Well, I'm doing fine with my band, which is now called Thursday's Children, which is more of a rock club band." And I said, "Well, come check it out." And I went and checked it out, and they were awesome. So I said, "You know what? Maybe I should move with these guys because these guys are going to try and make it, make a hit record." So I went with them, and 9 months later, we had You Keep Me Hanging On, that we worked up all different arrangements of different songs, and that one recorded, and that one was the one that really brought us to the top. 9 months later, that song was on the charts.
Yeah, Carmine, and I collect a lot of those concert posters from the late 1960s, and I noticed that every time Vanilla Fudge highlighted, the venue, Led Zeppelin was really in the back burner. So you can say Vanilla Fudge influenced Led Zeppelin. Is that accurate to say?
Without a doubt. And even like John Bonham, who's become the biggest rock drummer around because he was in Led Zeppelin and he was a great player. When he first met me, I was one of his idols, and he was like all gaga. Nobody knew who John Bonham was. It's like any new kid that been listening to other guys. Because nobody has it all. We all steal from each other. I mean, that's for sure. Like I idolize Gene Krupa. If I met Gene Krupa and I was unknown, I would have been unknown to him. But anyway, he loved my drum set. I called Ludwig for him and got him a drum set just like mine. I mean, it's ridiculous. I said, I think this guy's going to be big. Led Zeppelin and John Bonham, it's like the understatement of 5 decades, He became the biggest. But he had the same drum set as mine. He used it 6 months later when we did more touring, a double bass drum and everything. And finally, Page and Plant said it was too busy. Can he go down to one bass drum again, which he did. Once he did that, the Led Zeppelin drum set was born. So it was born out of my drum set, really. And we became good friends, and Led Zeppelin toured with us a lot. And we always went to their gigs and hung out with them, and we were friends. And there's some influences of Vanilla Fudge on that first Zeppelin album, like Your Time Is Going to Come with the whole big B3 intro. That was what we were known for. And someone told me that the chord changes to Good Times, Bad Time, the riff came from a riff that Tim Bogert did on one of our records. And they took that and made a song out of it. I don't know how true that is, but I could hear that. I mean, the kind of riff it is the kind of stuff Tim used to play.
Yeah, like RollingStone.com, they have you number 28 as the greatest drummer of all time. I mean, for me, you should be in the top 10 because you influenced the loud sound. And that loud sound now has lasted for over 4 decades. Yeah, so, I mean, you should definitely be in the top 10.
Well, I think it's because I wasn't in a huge group, one huge group. The guys that are in the top 10, it seemed that always were in one huge group. I don't remember who was in the top 10, but I know Bonham was probably number 1, and Neil Peart was in there. He was in Rush, and Mitch Mitchell and Ginger Baker. They were in one big group.
Right, and Ringo Starr.
Ringo Starr, yeah. I mean, Ringo, I believe, should be in there because he didn't just play drums. He invented more drum parts to a song than just playing time, So, and it's funny, I met all the Beatles. I never met Ringo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I bet you he respects you. That's for sure.
Well, maybe he does. I never talked to him, so I don't know.
Well, let me ask you, 68, 69, Fudge was so huge, right? And you got a chance to perform on Ed Sullivan. Do you recall how that arrangement was made, getting on Sullivan?
Well, you just, when you have, it was part of the business back then. When you start getting a hit record, You Keep Me Hanging On was like, I don't know, it was in the top 50, and we went on there, and that was 68. No, actually, Hanging On had been top 50, but the album came out and was number 4. The only thing holding us back was ahead of us was Sgt. Pepper. So we were like, we're happening. We were the first band to break a top 10 album without a smash single. And then hanging on at the end of September of '68, after we did the Sullivan Show, it became number 4 and brought the album back up. And at that point, we had 3 albums on the charts, in the top 100 and the top 4 singles. And 2 albums were in the top 30. One of them was in the top 15. So we were like huge, And the first album was on the charts for about a year and a half, So we went on, I think it was like before June of '68 when all that was happening. And then the following year when we released Near the Beginnings, we had Shotgun was a hit single, and the album was number 15 on the charts. And we went on again. And there's all according to the airplay, the sales. If you get to a certain point that the whole public will know you, then you end up on Ed Sullivan. But our performance on Ed Sullivan the first time and second time was stellar, and it really brought our album sales and single sales way up after we did that show, because there's like 50 million people watch that show.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, that was a big deal, and you were on Vanilla Fudge was on twice, '68 and '69, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, your younger brother Vinny is a performer. Did he copy the way you performed? I read that your dad would drive you to the gigs early in your career.
Yeah, I'm his big brother. We talked about this. We have a little TV show we do on Facebook Live. It's called Artists on Lockdown. It's me and Vinny and this guy Ron Anesti that owns a couple of venues in the Chicago area. He's had everybody in there. So we had different guests on it. And he talked about, somebody asked him, how did you start? Was Carmine an influence? I mean, come on. When he was 4 or 5 years old, I had band rehearsals in the living room, which he was like, wow, this is cool, And then when I made it and he saw me on Ed Sullivan, in '68, I was 22, so that means he was 11, So he was like totally inspired by seeing his brother on TV. He had all the posters, Vanilla Fudge posters downstairs. He had a little room with stereo, like a psychedelic room. I left the drum set home. He started playing it. And then I noticed the talent. And a couple of years ago, we did an album called, Sinister, Appice Brothers Sinister album. There's a song called Brothers and Drums, where I tell the story. I wrote the lyrics and the melody about how, when I started playing, there was no little Vinny, And then when he grew up, he saw me, and my mother said, he's driving me crazy like you did, practicing, So it's a really cool song, and we're brothers in drums, But when I saw him play, I said, wow, who taught him this? And my mother said, he's in there every day after school. He's driving me like you did, She said, what do you think? I said, well, he sounds good. So what should we do? I said, let's send him to my teacher, a guy named Dick Bennett, who unfortunately, rest in peace, just passed away of the virus a month and a half ago. But I sent Vinny to him, and he started going. He was like 11. By the time he was like 13 or 14, he was really good.
Really?
And then he cut his own way. He's cut his own way. He used to rehearse at the record plant. The record plant in New York City was managing him. Jimmy Iovine, do you know that name? Jimmy Iovine?
I've heard of it. Not familiar, but I've heard of it.
He's a record company Mongol. He owned Interscope Records. They bought Geffen. He's huge. He's huge. Now he's a billionaire. Vinny met him. He lived in Brooklyn. Vinny used to pick him up and go to the record plant with him, and got his first deal. Vinny doing hand claps on John Lennon's song "Whatever Gets You Through the Night," because they were rehearsing upstairs with 9 guys in the band, and they needed hand claps. So Jimmy Iovine came up and said, "Hey, come on down. We need you to do some hand claps." Didn't tell him who. They walk in the studio to see John Lennon in the control room. Then they're listening to him on the cans, talking to him. So it was really surreal. He was still in high school, my brother.
Wow. And Vinny's got his own website, vinnyappice.com, for those listening. And your website is carmineappice.net, right?
Well, I'm .com or .net, or either one. When Rick Derringer called my house there to call Vinny, my mother answered, and she said, oh, you want to talk to Carmine? He goes, no, I want to talk to Vinny. No, you're calling for Carmine, right? And she couldn't believe that Rick Derringer, who was big at the time, was calling for Vinny. you know. So then
Jeez.
Vinny ended up playing. You know, he quit high school and he went on the road with Rick Derringer, and they played opening up for Aerosmith in stadiums and arenas. He did that for a few years, and then ended up in Black Sabbath, and then Dio, and then back to Black Sabbath, and then, you know, he's cut his own way, you know.
And Carmine, there was never jealousy between you and Vinny. It was a tight-knit family.
Not really. I mean, I always helped Vinny. You know, I mean, I got him endorsements. I left a drum set at home there for him. You know, and then he wrecked it. And that was my "You Keep Me Hanging On" drum set. Because when I got my maple Ludwigs, he thought, "Oh man, I want to take the red sparkle off and have drums made of wood like Carmine." And he ripped the red sparkle off, and he ruined the drums. You know, so those would have been a collector's item because they were the ones on Ed Sullivan and all that. You know.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, if you still have that first drum set you purchased, because, you know, that's very valuable today.
No, but as a matter of fact, today, you know, I have a group I'm producing and managing called Kodiak. They're from New Jersey. They're like a young Van Halen, and we just moved to Florida. I'm looking out here at a lake and at palm trees and a canal. It's gorgeous out here. And these guys drove me down in their van and their trailer so I could bring my collectible Slingerland drums that I've had for 14 years. And today we're going to a modern drummer drum museum, which has all the classic people's drum set, you know, Ginger Baker, and, you know, they have 3 of my drum sets. They have the one that Rod Stewart, one which is a custom gold leopard Slingerland kit that I got into. You know?
Yeah,
and everybody else, Ginger Baker.
I'm losing you.
I don't know why. I got full. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I have like 4 minutes left. I wanted to ask you, Carmine. So what was it that you found interesting? Because you're known in the industry for setting the foundation on heavy drumming. What was it about heavy drumming that turned you on?
Well, it wasn't anything that turned on. It was out of necessity. So you had to pound hard and have big drums that are louder, which I pioneered the big drums in different sizes and cymbals and everything, made everything strong because there were no PAs. So I just did it out of necessity. I didn't sit down and go, I'm going to start something new called heavy drumming. I didn't do that. I did what I had to do for necessity. My first thing was a big bass drum. That was louder, and that worked. So when I got my endorsement with Ludwig, I got everything big. Big toms, big snare drum, big bass drums, big everything. And that started the foundation of big drums where a lot of people bought drums. Even Max Weinberg bought a kit, a duplicate of my kit back then. You know, he told me a few days ago. I didn't know that. You know, so a lot of people bought my drums, like Bonzo got my drums, you know, those guys got my drums. A lot of big drummers bought drums. Tommy Aldridge had a drum set just like mine. You know, so that's how it influenced everybody. And the fact that you have to play those drums hard and how loud and heavy to get the sound out, which I started doing. So that's how it started.
Now, you joined arguably the best front man in the business, Rod Stewart. Can you talk a little bit about playing with Rod Stewart?
Playing with Rod was great. You know, I love Rod. He was the best drummer, the greatest voice in rock at the time. And I knew him from before I joined him. We were on tour with the Faces, with my group Cactus, and I knew him when he was with Jeff Beck. So I've known him for a while. So when I heard he needed a drummer, I called his tour manager, and he said, let me tell Rod you're interested. So Rod told me to go to his house and check the band out. And I knew 2 members of the band anyway, and I played together with them, and it was magic. And Rod came back from Europe. He played with us, and he said, if you want the gig, you got it. I'll give you a solo every night. I know you have fans. And ended up really great because Rod would do all the big national press, you know, like People Magazine and stuff like that. And I would do the local press when we went into towns. So I got a lot of PR out of it, and Rod trusted me to do the press. Gave me a drum solo every night. He says he knew when he'd come back, the audience would be riled up, you know. And I had to adjust my drum solo for that audience because it wasn't as a technical audience as like Beck, Bogan, Appice, or Cactus. It was more of a pop audience, a lot of women. So I had to adjust my solo to that audience, you know.
Yeah, and I want to remind the audience that you were instrumental, Carmine, in writing two of Stewart's biggest hits, right? Do You Think I'm Sexy and Young Turks?
Exactly, yeah. And that, he was fair. He'd say, I want a song like Missing You from the Rolling Stones. So he told the whole band. So we went back. I wrote these chord changes and melody ideas, went to my friend's house. We put it down in like a little studio, and I presented it to Rod. He loved it. So we did. That was Do You Think I'm Sexy? And then that I got my friend Dwayne Dwayne Hitchings into the ballpark, basically, when we did the next album, a couple of albums down the line. He wanted a song like a punky-sounding song. So me and Dwayne put together Young Turks at Dwayne's studio, and he loved that too. And that was the first song that ever used a Oberheim drum machine in place of drums, where I overdubbed hi-hat and cymbals, but I programmed the drum machine. And it became a huge hit. And then we did another song called Tonight I'm Yours on that album with the same kind of sound, So it was a good run with Rod. And, I have a book out called Stick It, My Life of Sex, Drums, and Rock and Roll. It's my autobiography, and Rod wrote the intro for me,
Wow, so they're telling me I have it's like 30 seconds left. So
Okay.
what are you up to? What new projects you're up to? What are you doing?
Right now we're mixing a new Cactus record, and we're going to do a tour next year with Cactus, Rick Derringer, Pat Travers. We have a deposit on the new Fudge record, and I'm producing and managing this group Kodiak, and that's pretty much it. That keeps me pretty busy, and I'm promoting my book. We just did a video, me and my brother, for Ronnie James Dio to celebrate the 10th anniversary of his death. We did a song called Monsters and Heroes on our album, which is all about Ronnie. So we did a live lockdown version of that, which you probably John sent you, I would think.
I haven't received it yet, but I would appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll email John and tell him to send you a copy of the MP3 and the video. Okay. You can put the video on your website and socials and all that. It's really awesome. The lyrics are fantastic, And if you go to CarmineAppice.com, the lyrics are right. I'm sorry, AppiceBrothers.com. Then click on the lyrics, and the video's there too. If you want to do that, check it out.
And for the audience listening to the show, if they want to purchase Stick It, where can they buy it?
Amazon. You get autographed copies at CarmineAppice.com.
And my final question, what part of Brooklyn you're from? I'm from Canarsie.
Oh, Borough Park.
Oh, Borough Park. Cool.
I used to go to Canarsie Pier and make out with chicks in the car.
And it's still there. Yeah, that was a hot spot.
You know that one, right?
right off the Bell Parkway.
Yes. Right off the Bell Parkway. In 64, I was 17. I took driver's ed so I could drive early. And then I bought a brand new 64 Chevy 327 4-speed, right? So I pick up chicks at gigs and go down there because I live with my parents. I go down to the Canarsie Pier and make out.
They're telling me I have to go. Listen, it was an honor to speak to you. Whenever you want to come back, let me know. We'll have you back.
Let's go. I'll tell John. We'll do it again.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The legendary Carmine Appice. Until next week, happy collecting to all.